The dust of the unforgiving Arizona territory swirled around Tess Finley as she trudged barefoot along the barren trail, her bleeding feet leaving faint crimson marks on the parched earth while her infant son wailed against her chest, both of them desperate for salvation in the merciless summer of 1879. Her once fine cotton dress hung in tatters around her slim frame, the fabric torn and stained with the trials of her journey. The small bundle wrapped in a tattered shawl against her chest was her only reason for continuing this seemingly hopeless trek. Little Benjamin, barely 3 months old, whimpered weakly, his cries growing fainter as the relentless sun beat down upon them. "Hush now, my sweet boy," Tess whispered, pressing her cracked lips to his forehead. "We will find shelter soon." The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. They had been walking for 2 days since the stagecoach had been ambushed. The driver and the other passengers had been killed, but in the chaos, Tess had managed to flee with Benjamin into the scrubland. Now, with no water and no shoes lost when she'd crossed a muddy creek bed, she feared they would both perish in this desolate landscape. The distant sound of hoofbeats made Tess freeze. Bandits. She clutched Benjamin tighter and glanced around frantically for a place to hide, but the sparse landscape offered no refuge. The hoofbeats grew louder, and she stumbled off the trail, her feet catching on the rough ground as she attempted to put distance between herself and whoever approached. A horse's whinny sounded much closer than she expected. Tess turned to see a rider cresting the hill behind her. The sun silhouetted his tall frame atop a muscular chestnut horse. His wide-brimmed hat and the rifle holstered at his side marked him as a local, not one of the bandits who had attacked the coach. "Madam," the man called out, his deep voice carrying across the distance between them. "You all right there?" Tess swayed, light-headed from hunger and thirst. "Please," she managed to call out, "my baby." The rider spurred his horse forward, closing the distance between them in seconds. As he drew nearer, Tess could make out his features. A strong jawline covered with several days' worth of stubble, piercing blue eyes, and a face weathered by years under the harsh sun. He was perhaps 35, with broad shoulders and capable hands that guided his horse with easy confidence. "Good Lord, madam," he said, swinging down from his mount. "What happened to you?" Tess opened her mouth to answer, but her parched throat produced no sound. Benjamin whimpered again, his tiny face red and hot with dehydration. "The stagecoach," she finally managed. "Robbers, 2 days ago." The man's expression darkened. "The Mesquite Pass robbery, we heard about it yesterday." His eyes took in her bleeding feet, torn clothing, and the bundle against her chest. "You've been walking all this time," she nodded weakly. Without hesitation, the man uncorked his canteen and held it to her lips. "Drink slowly," he cautioned. "Too much at once will make you sick." The water was warm but tasted like heaven as it slid down her throat. After she had taken a few careful sips, she moistened her finger and touched it to Benjamin's lips, trying to give him some relief. "Your little one needs more than that," the man said, reaching for his saddlebag. He pulled out a clean bandana and soaked it with water. "Here, let him suck on this. It'll help until we can get you both back to my place." "Your place?" Tess asked, her voice still rough. The man nodded. "Name's Dawson James. My ranch is about 5 miles east of here." He glanced at her feet. "You can't walk another step on those, and your baby needs proper care." Tess hesitated. She knew nothing about this man except his name. As if reading her thoughts, Dawson smiled gently. "I've got 4 little ones at home, madam. One more ain't trouble. My housekeeper, Mrs. Halloran, will get you both fixed up. 4 children." Tess asked, surprised by this rugged cowboy's revelation. "Yes, madam, my sister's children. She passed 2 years back, and they've been with me since." A shadow crossed his face, but he quickly recovered. "Can you tell me your name?" "Tess Finley, and this is Benjamin." Dawson nodded. "Well, Miss Finley, let's get you and young Benjamin to safety." Before Tess could respond, Dawson had lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. With practiced ease, he settled her sideways on his horse, careful of the baby, then mounted behind her. "Hold onto Benjamin tight," he instructed, his arm coming around her waist to steady her as he took the reins. "Cinnamon here is gentle, but the trail's rough in spots." As they rode, Tess found herself leaning against Dawson's solid chest. The steady beat of his heart and the rhythmic movement of the horse lulled Benjamin into a much-needed sleep. Despite her ordeal, Tess felt safer than she had in a very long time. "What brings you to the territory, Miss Finley?" Dawson asked after they had ridden in silence for a while. Tess sighed. "I was heading to Tucson. My cousin offered me a position as a schoolteacher there after my husband died." She glanced down at Benjamin. "Brian was barely a month old when influenza took Jacob last winter." "I'm sorry for your loss," Dawson said quietly. "Thank you." "We were only married for a year." Tess felt tears threaten but blinked them away. "Jacob was a good man, but his passing left me with nothing in St. Louis. My cousin Mary wrote that Tucson needed teachers, and she had a room for us in her boarding house." "Tucson's growing fast," Dawson commented. "Good place for a fresh start, though it's still another 80 miles south of my place." Tess nodded. "The stagecoach driver said we'd reach it by tomorrow evening. Before—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "The James Ranch is just over that ridge," Dawson said, changing the subject. "It's not much, but we've got clean water, food, and a doctor who visits regular from the town of Dry Creek, about 10 miles away." As they crested the ridge, Tess saw a sprawling ranch spread out below them. A 2-story wooden house stood in the center, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn. A windmill turned lazily beside a water tank, and a garden plot showed green against the dusty landscape. Smoke curled from the chimney, and as they approached, Tess could see children playing in the yard. "There they are," Dawson said, a note of pride in his voice. "The wild bunch." 4 children of varying ages looked up at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. The oldest, a girl of perhaps 12, immediately corralled the younger ones and stood watching their approach with a protective stance that reminded Tess of Dawson himself. "Uncle Daw," called the youngest, a boy of about 4, breaking free and running toward them. "Hold up there, Billy," Dawson called. "We've got visitors who need help." The children gathered around as Dawson carefully dismounted, then reached up to help Tess down. She swayed on her injured feet, and Dawson immediately swept her back into his arms. "Barbara," he addressed the oldest girl, "run tell Mrs. Halloran to prepare the guest room and heat some water. We've got a lady and her baby who need tending." The girl nodded seriously and ran toward the house, her long braids bouncing against her back. "That's Barbara, she's 12, Dawson explained as he carried Tess toward the house. "Then there's Peter, who's 9, Sarah, who's 7, and little Billy, who's 4. The children followed in a curious procession as Dawson carried Tess up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was surprisingly well kept, with simple but comfortable furnishings. A plump woman with gray-streaked hair appeared from what Tess assumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Gracious heavens," the woman exclaimed. "What have you found now, Dawson James?" "Miss Tess Finley and her son Benjamin," Dawson replied. "Survivors of the Mesquite Pass robbery. They need care, Mrs. Halloran." The housekeeper's expression softened immediately. "Of course they do, poor things. The guest room is ready. I'll fetch clean linens and my medicine box." Dawson carried Tess up a narrow staircase to a small but clean bedroom with a window overlooking the ranch yard. He set her gently on the edge of the bed. "Mrs. Halloran will help you get cleaned up," he said, stepping back. "She was a nurse during the war, so she'll know what to do for your feet. I'll send Peter to fetch Doc Miller from town, just to be sure the little one is all right." "Thank you," Tess said, meeting his eyes. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." Dawson shook his head. "No need for that. Rest now. We'll talk more when you're feeling better." After he left, Mrs. Halloran bustled in with supplies. With gentle efficiency, she helped Tess bathe Benjamin, who cried weakly but seemed relieved by the cool water. The housekeeper prepared a sugar water solution for the baby, showing Tess how to feed it to him a few drops at a time with a clean cloth. "Poor little mite," Mrs. Halloran said, "but he's strong. Look at how he grips your finger." Once Benjamin was settled in a makeshift cradle, a dresser drawer lined with soft blankets, Mrs. Halloran turned her attention to Tess. She helped her undress and bathe, then examined her feet with a critical eye. "Nasty cuts, but no serious damage," she pronounced. "I'll clean them well and wrap them. Stay off them for a few days and they'll heal fine." After applying a stinging solution that made Tess gasp, Mrs. Halloran bandaged her feet and helped her into a simple cotton nightgown. "One of Barbara's mother's," she explained. "Sarah has been wearing her things since she grew, but this should fit you well enough until we can wash your own clothes." "Barbara's mother was Dawson's sister?" Tess asked. Mrs. Halloran nodded, her expression growing somber. "Charlotte. She was a fine woman. Consumption took her 2 years ago. Her husband had died in a mining accident the year before, so Dawson took in all 4 children. Never hesitated, even though he was a bachelor who knew nothing about raising young ones. He seems to be doing well with them," Tess observed. "He's a good man," Mrs. Halloran said firmly. "Works himself to the bone for this ranch and those children. Never complains, though I know it's not the life he imagined for himself." She patted Tess's hand. "Now you rest. I'll bring you some broth and bread when you wake." Left alone with her sleeping son, Tess settled back against the pillows. For the first time in days, she felt safe. As exhaustion claimed her, her last thought was of Dawson's kind blue eyes and the gentle way he had carried her, as if she were something precious. When Tess awoke, the room was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Benjamin was still sleeping peacefully in his makeshift cradle, his color much improved. A tray with a covered bowl and a slice of bread sat on the bedside table, along with a pitcher of water. As she stirred, the door opened slightly, and Barbara's serious face appeared. "Oh, you're awake," the girl said. "Mrs. Halloran said to check on you and the baby. Please come in," Tess invited, sitting up against the pillows. Barbara entered, closing the door quietly behind her. She moved to the cradle and peered down at Benjamin. "He's so small," she whispered. "He's 3 months old," Tess said, reaching for the water glass. "Thank you for checking on us." Barbara nodded, her expression solemn beyond her years. "Uncle Daw said you were a school teacher." "I was training to be one," Tess corrected, "in St. Louis." "We don't have a proper school here," Barbara said, perching on the edge of a chair near the bed. "Mrs. Halloran teaches us reading and figures, and Uncle Daw teaches us riding and ranching. But Peter wants to be a doctor someday, and I want to read all the books in the world." Tess smiled at the girl's earnestness. "Those are fine ambitions. You have many books here. Uncle Daw has a shelf full. He reads to us every night, even when he's tired from working all day." Barbara's expression softened. "He's the best uncle in the world, even though he's strict sometimes." "He seems like a very good man," Tess agreed. "Taking care of all of you and the ranch, too." Barbara nodded. "Mama always said he had the biggest heart in the territory, but he hid it under all that gruffness." She hesitated, then added, "He's never brought a lady home before." Before Tess could respond to this revelation, There was a knock at the door, and Dawson himself entered, followed by an elderly man carrying a medical bag. "Miss Finley, this is Doc Miller," Dawson said. "Hope we didn't wake you." "Not at all," Tess replied, suddenly conscious of her appearance in the borrowed nightgown. "Barbara has been keeping me company." The doctor, a thin man with spectacles and a neat white beard, approached the bed. "Heard you had quite an ordeal, young lady. Let's have a look at those feet first, then check on the little one." Barbara excused herself, and the doctor examined Tess's feet with professional detachment. "Mrs. Halloran did a fine job," he pronounced. "Keep them clean and bandaged for a few days. No walking except necessary trips." He then turned his attention to Benjamin, who had awakened and was making soft cooing sounds. The doctor's examination was gentle but thorough. "A strong little fellow," he said at last. "Some dehydration, but no lasting harm done. Keep giving him the sugar water along with regular feeding for another day, then he should be ready for normal care." "Thank you, doctor," Tess said, relief flooding through her. "Don't thank me," Doc Miller replied, packing up his bag. "Thank this fellow here for finding you when he did." Another day out there. He didn't need to finish the sentence. After the doctor left, Dawson lingered awkwardly by the door. "Mrs. Halloran says you should stay in bed tomorrow, but if you feel up to it the day after, you could join us for meals downstairs." "I don't want to impose," Tess began, but Dawson cut her off. "It's no imposition. When you're feeling better, we can discuss getting you to Tucson. The next stage won't come through for 2 weeks, but I could take you in the wagon once you're stronger." Tess nodded, though the thought of continuing her journey suddenly seemed less appealing than it had before. "Thank you again, Mr. James." "Dawson," he corrected. "Nobody calls me Mr. James except the bank manager in Dry Creek, and that's only when I'm behind on the mortgage payments." His smile transformed his face, erasing the weariness and revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Dawson, then," Tess said, returning his smile. "And please call me Tess." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, an unexpected connection forming between them. Then Benjamin gave a small cry, breaking the spell. "I'll let you rest," Dawson said, moving toward the door. "If you need anything, just call. Someone's always within earshot." True to Dawson's word, Tess was never left wanting during her recovery. Mrs. Halloran checked on her regularly, bringing meals and fresh water. The children visited in shifts, with Barbara taking a special interest in helping with Benjamin. Even Peter, normally shy around strangers according to Mrs. Halloran, brought a carved wooden horse to place on Tess's bedside table. "Uncle Daw taught me whittling," the boy explained proudly. "I'm making a whole herd, but you can have this one." By the third day, Tess was eager to leave the confines of her room. Her feet, though still tender, had healed enough for her to walk short distances. Mrs. Halloran had washed and mended her dress, but also provided a simple skirt and blouse that had belonged to Charlotte. "They're just gathering dust," the housekeeper said when Tess protested. "Charlotte would want them used." Dressed in the borrowed clothes, with Benjamin cradled in her arms, Tess made her way carefully down the stairs. She found the family gathered around the breakfast table, Dawson at the head, the children arranged by age, and Mrs. Halloran bustling between the table and the stove. "Miss Tess," Billy cried, spotting her first. "Uncle Daw, look." Dawson rose immediately, crossing the room to offer her his arm. "Should you be up?" "I'm much better," Tess assured him, and eager to join the land of the living again. He guided her to an empty chair beside his own, and Sarah immediately scooted over to make room. "Can I hold the baby?" the 7-year-old asked eagerly. "After breakfast, perhaps," Tess replied, settling Benjamin in her lap. "If you're very careful." Breakfast was a lively affair, with the children talking over each other and Dawson attempting to maintain some semblance of order. Tess found herself drawn into their conversations, answering questions about St. Louis and her teaching experience. "Perhaps you could help the children with their lessons while you're here," Mrs. Halloran suggested, refilling Dawson's coffee cup. "Barbara in particular could use more advanced instruction than I can provide." "I'd be happy to," Tess agreed, catching Barbara's hopeful expression. "That's settled then," Dawson said. "Tess will help with lessons in the mornings, and you youngsters will be on your best behavior." He fixed each child with a stern look that was belied by the twinkle in his eyes. After breakfast, Dawson excused himself to tend to ranch duties, and Mrs. Halloran took the younger children to help with household chores. Barbara remained behind, offering to show Tess around the house once she felt ready. "It was my mother's home," Barbara explained as they toured the downstairs. "She and Uncle Daw inherited it from our grandparents. Uncle Daw lived in the bunkhouse with the ranch hands until Mother died. Then he moved into the main house to take care of us." The house was larger than it appeared from outside, with a formal parlor rarely used, a comfortable family sitting room, Dawson's small study lined with bookshelves, and a large kitchen with an adjoining dining room. The furnishings were sturdy and well-maintained, if somewhat dated. "Uncle Daw hasn't changed anything since Mother died," Barbara said, leading Tess back to the sitting room. "He says it's still her house and he's just keeping it for us." Tess settled onto a comfortable sofa, Benjamin asleep in her arms. "Your uncle is a remarkable man." Barbara nodded seriously. "Mother always said he was the most loyal person she knew. That's why she never worried about us if anything happened to her." The girl's voice caught slightly. "She made him promise to keep us together no matter what, and he has," Tess said gently. "Yes." Barbara straightened her shoulders. "But it's hard for him. I heard Mrs. Halloran say that no woman would take on a ready-made family of 4, so Uncle Daw will probably never marry now." The statement, delivered with a child's blunt honesty, made Tess's heart ache for Dawson. She remembered his kindness when he found her on the trail. "I've got 4. One more ain't trouble." He had accepted the responsibility of his sister's children without hesitation, apparently understanding it might mean a lifetime alone. The days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Each morning, Tess worked with the children on their lessons, finding that even young Billy was eager to learn when the material was presented in an engaging way. In the afternoons, she often sat on the porch with her mending or a book, Benjamin napping nearby, while the children played in the yard or helped with simple chores. Dawson was often absent during the day, working with his small crew of ranch hands to manage the cattle and horses that were the ranch's livelihood. But he always returned for the evening meal, cleaned up and attentive to his family. After dinner, the family gathered in the sitting room where Dawson read aloud from one of his precious books stories of adventure that enthralled the children, and often caused Tess to lose track of her mending as she listened to his rich voice bringing the tales to life. A week passed, then 2. Tess's feet healed completely, and Benjamin thrived in the stable environment, gaining weight and becoming more alert each day. The date of the next stagecoach's arrival drew closer, but Tess found herself increasingly reluctant to continue her journey to Tucson. One evening, after the children had been put to bed and Mrs. Halloran had retired to her room off the kitchen, Tess found herself alone with Dawson in the sitting room. Benjamin was asleep in his cradle, a proper one that Dawson had brought down from the attic, explaining it had belonged to his sister's children. "I received a letter from the stage company today," Dawson said, breaking the comfortable silence. "The next coach will pass through Dry Creek on Friday." Tess's heart sank. Friday was only 3 days away. "I see. If you still wish to continue to Tucson, I can take you into town that morning." His voice was carefully neutral. "Is that what you think I should do?" Tess asked, setting aside her sewing to look at him directly. Dawson met her gaze, his blue eyes serious. "I think you should do what's best for you and Benjamin. And what if I don't know what that is anymore?" Tess admitted. "When I left St. Louis, Tucson seemed like my only option, but now—" "Now," Dawson prompted when she trailed off. Tess took a deep breath. "Now I've seen another possibility. The children need a proper education. Barbara especially is so bright. She deserves more than what Mrs. Halloran can provide. And you've taken on so much responsibility alone." Dawson leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Are you offering to stay on as the children's teacher, Tess? Perhaps. If that would be helpful." She hesitated, then added more boldly, "But I think we both know there could be more to it than that." The tension in the room thickened. Dawson stood and moved to the window, looking out into the darkness. "I won't pretend I haven't thought about asking you to stay," he said finally. "The children adore you. Benjamin brings joy to this house that's been missing for too long, and you—" He turned to face her. "You've brought something back to life in me that I thought was gone forever." Tess rose and crossed to stand before him. "I feel the same way. When Jacob died, I thought that part of my life was over. I never expected to find someone who could make me feel this way again." Dawson reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't have much to offer, Tess. This ranch barely breaks even most years. The children come first in everything. And I'm not a sophisticated man. I've spent my life in this territory, working with cattle and horses." "Those aren't drawbacks, Dawson," Tess said softly. "They're the reasons I've come to care for you. Your dedication to family, your hard work, your kindness, those are worth more than any fortune or fancy manners." He took her hands in his calloused palms warm against her skin. "If you stayed, what would you want it to be? A teacher living in our home? Or—" He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "Or something more permanent?" Tess's heart pounded. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Dawson James?" A slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I reckon I am, though I'm making a mess of it. I never thought I'd have the chance to marry, not with 4 children depending on me. But if you were willing to take on this ready-made family, I've got 4. One more ain't trouble." Tess quoted his words from their first meeting, smiling through sudden tears. "That's what you said when you found me." "And I meant it," Dawson said, his voice rough with emotion. "Tess Finley, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Mother to these children who already love you, partner in this ranch and whatever future we can build together." "Yes," Tess whispered, joy bubbling up inside her. "Yes, I will." Dawson pulled her gently into his arms and lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was tender at first, almost reverent, then deepened with a passion that left them both breathless when they finally parted. "I love you, Tess," Dawson murmured against her hair. "I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you on that trail, determined to save your son even when you had nothing left to give." "I love you too," Tess replied, resting her head against his chest. "You and the children and this place, it already feels like home." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Dry Creek, with Doc Miller giving the bride away and Mrs. Halloran weeping happily in the front pew. The children stood proudly beside them, Benjamin cradled in Barbara's careful arms throughout the ceremony. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The ranch prospered under their joint management, with Tess introducing modern accounting methods she had learned in St. Louis, and Dawson expanding their herd with selective breeding. The school lessons continued, with the sitting room converted to a classroom where Tess eventually taught not only the James children but several from neighboring ranches as well. Benjamin grew into a sturdy boy with his mother's determination and his adoptive father's love of the land. He never remembered a time when Dawson wasn't his father, or when Barbara, Peter, Sarah, and Billy weren't his beloved siblings. When Tess gave birth to twin girls 2 years after their marriage, the family circle widened to encompass Diana and Dorothea James, with the same generous love that had brought Tess and Benjamin into the fold. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their brood of 7 children play in the twilight, Dawson took Tess's hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "You ever regret not continuing to Tucson?" he asked, a question he had never posed before. Tess leaned against his shoulder, contentment warming her from within. "Not for a single moment. Everything I needed was right here, waiting for me to find it. Even with all the chaos and hard work," he teased, nodding toward the children who were now engaged in a spirited game of tag. "Especially with the chaos," Tess replied, turning to kiss him softly. "You were right that day on the trail. One more wasn't trouble, it was the beginning of everything good in our lives." As the sun set over the Arizona landscape, casting long shadows across the ranch they had built together, Tess reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the desperate young widow walking barefoot with her baby to the fulfilled woman surrounded by family and purpose, her path had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. "I'd walk 1,000 miles barefoot to end up exactly here," she whispered against Dawson's lips. "Thankfully, you won't have to," he replied, drawing her closer as their children's laughter filled the evening air. "This is where you belong, Tess James, now and always." In the soft glow of twilight, with the ranch house warm and welcoming behind them and their children playing safely before them, Tess knew that the desperate journey that had seemed like the end of her hopes had actually been the beginning of her greatest adventure, a love story written not in the pages of Dawson's books, but in the daily life they had created together in this corner of the Wild West. The James Ranch became known throughout the territory, not only for its fine horses and cattle, but for the family that made it thrive, a family built not solely on blood but on love, choice, and the courage to believe that sometimes the greatest journeys lead us exactly where we need to be. As the years passed, the ranch expanded, the children grew, and Tess and Dawson's love deepened with each season. The barefoot woman with her baby and the cowboy who had room in his heart for one more had found in each other not just salvation from immediate danger, but a lifetime of partnership, passion, and purpose that neither could have imagined on that fateful day when their paths crossed on a dusty Arizona trail.